So you've landed on this video. Heat pumps. What are heat pumps? You're sick of seeing about heat pumps. They're all over the news. Heat pumps this, heat pump that. Heat pumps aren't designed properly. The manufacturers are lying to you. There are so many questions that need answering. And today I'm sitting down with what I call Mr. Heat Pump Legend, or as he calls himself, the matter to do with heat pumps, Graham Hendra.
Hello.
Thank you, Graham.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for meeting us today. It's been really, really good to get you down here. Just want to go through four points with you today. One, why you got into heat pumps, air conditioning, refrigeration. What you're up to these days, because you're a kind of a busy man in a non-busy way. It's done on your terms now, which is good for a lot of people, by the way. Do you think heat pumps are for everyone? And that could be air to air and air to water. There's a lot of confusion about that. I'm still seeing posts online at the moment where people are saying, oh, people are still really negative towards heat pumps. What's wrong with them? Well, I see these comments. I'm like, well, they're not wrong. They're not right. Mm-hmm. And the design for residential and commercial, there's been so much noise with so much people. I know you've written a lot of content on it. I see both sides with the differences. Some people are, it's very black or white. I'd like your views on them.
Of course.
And if heat pumps are the future, how can the Labour government convince homeowners and commercial building owners that they need to get behind it? So just going for a few incentives, what they can do, because I know you deal with a lot of heat pump engineers and you see the pains that they go through. Is there an easier solution? And maybe we can send them this video afterwards. And I don't know, Ed Miliband might actually listen. But there we go.
Sounds good. You might have to remind me of those questions again.
I will go for the points. So what did day one of your HVAC journey look like?
That one's really easy. I'm a bit stupid, so I did my A-levels, failed spectacularly, and decided to go on the dole. And my dad asked me a question. I'll never forget it. He said, "How much is the dole?" And I said, "It's 39 quid a week." He said, "Your rent's 40." So I got a job.
Wow.
And the first job I went for was air conditioning. I didn't even know what it was.
Do you remember applying for the job or hearing about it?
Well, it's like everything in life. The guy I went for the interview was one of my dad's ex-students, so he sort of felt obliged to give me the job.
Right, okay.
So it was the only thing I had. I wanted to be honest, I wanted to be a Formula One mechanic.
Okay, okay.
So I got into this.
So you chose the better trade, HVAC?
He had more money.
So was your dad into HVAC?
No, he's a professor of chemistry.
Oh, wow.
So
okay.
when I failed chemistry A-level, that was very difficult. Discussion.
Difficult pill to swallow.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, right, okay.
So I got this job. I remember my first day. My boss drove me around in his car to show me what an air conditioner was. I fell asleep in the car, which I think is a bad thing to do on the first day. Okay. And then I basically worked with a guy who taught me what to do. He was a chimney sweep. And I'm not joking. I was trained by Chimney Sweep, and I was a filter basher. 2 years of wandering around cleaning filters, and then I did a little bit of service. I tried install, but it wasn't for me. I can't get anything level.
What year was this?
1990.
Wow. What did aircon look like then? There was obviously not many air conditioning units.
No, so
and not many heat pumps.
No, so cassettes were new, really new. Lot of wall mount and floor mount. We used to have a lot of metal casing and wooden casing.
I remember them, the old Master units, IMI units.
So when you undo the lid, it tears you off the ladder. That's the kiddies. Cut your fingers on the tin work. There's a lot of that.
Okay.
And so it was the early days. There's this new company we'd never heard of called Daikin turned up, changed the world. Multi-splits were new. VRF was new, or VRV. It was kind of really lovely because we were at this all new stuff, lighter, easier units, well made. We couldn't believe it. And much, much more complicated electrics then, all the polarity of the wiring had to be correct and so on. But similar to
So did that come out while you were with the Chimney Sweep? Was it like you were servicing them and then you'd see this brand new unit and all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is different?
Yeah, so we did a lot of like window rattlers. And so me and the sweep were going around basically with a can of Mr. Sheen and a paintbrush.
Wow.
Cleaning them off. He didn't have a clue. It was superb.
Okay.
So nor did I. And then we started going around. So we were in the company installed. So we started servicing that stuff, and you see the wall mount and all that lot. So yeah, it was great fun. It was quite funny. So I was 20 and he was 40, so obviously a really old man.
Yeah.
And we used to drive round, and he would be flirting with all the sort of middle-aged women.
Oh, wow,
And I
okay.
thought, "God, she looks like my mum." It was good, but yeah, happy days. And I don't know if he's still doing chimney sweeping, but I've moved on from the filter back.
So you started into that, and did you then make a decision one day to get into more service, more install? Well, you said you wasn't a fan of install. Where was that transgression to?
Well, that was quite easy. So I remember where I was when I fixed my first unit. Yeah, so we used to get sent along and, have something wrong. I couldn't fix it. I'm just a filter basher. And I kind of went, I want to fix this. I want to see what's going on. So I was going to college one day a week. And so you slowly learn stuff. And I remember doing a bookies shop on London Bridge, Tote Bookmakers. And weirdly, it had a parking space. And so I could sit there all day. And I went in and there was a Toshiba cassette, I think. And I couldn't get it working. The woman said, "Oh, no one can get this working." And I thought, I'm going to fight this thing. So it was about 3 hours, and I worked out as a little relay on a board. They ordered the board, I put it in, and you get that amazing feeling when it starts up. I'm the man.
Yeah.
And I went, I want to do more of that. So I then did sort of more service, bumped into a couple of commissioning engineers, and realised that they were the glory hunters. Yeah, turn up with no tools, no oxyacetylene, swanning in a car, press some buttons and waltz out. And I thought, I am a glory hunter. I can have a bit of that.
Right,
and so I became a commissioning engineer.
Wow. Okay. What year was that?
95.
Okay. And then from 95 to, did you do that for some time?
Yeah, I did. I moved around a lot because I wanted more money.
Okay.
So I worked for 3 Daikin distributors.
Wow.
And by 2000, I ended up at Pillinger Air, or the mighty Pillinger Air, as we called it. And I then, someone left, and I ended up, so I was doing a lot of training then. You sort of bleed from commissioning into training, I guess. And then somebody left the marketing department. They said, "Do you fancy doing marketing?"
Oh,
and I
wow,
went,
okay.
Okay. Which was basically organising golf days. And then
that was the 90s, folks.
Yeah.
Lots of trips away, I've heard. Not like that anymore.
Some of it unrepeatable.
You've ruined it for us, Graham, actually organising that.
Yeah,
there used to be trips to Vegas and trips around
happy
Europe.
days. Yeah, people. I'm not going to mention on your podcast some of the stuff that happened, but it was good. And then Daikin bought us all. So he bought all the distributors. And I was kind of on the cusp of becoming technical manager, which is what I wanted to be. And then the 3 firms came together, and I now had 3 bosses and so on. So I was a bit, kind of down in the dumps. And I got offered technical manager at LG for a ridiculous amount of money. So I arrived on day 1, and they said, "You are the technical department. Do what you like." So I set it up. My boss retired, so I went for his job. That was a mistake. So I became general manager.
Okay.
And then I was kind of looking, I realised I was just out of my depth there. And Neil Afram saved me again from Space Air. He basically met me at some do and said, "You look miserable." And I said, "I am." And he said, "Why don't you come work for me again?" And I turned up and he said, "You're going to do heat pumps." That's Neil's way. He tells you what you're doing. So he said, "You're doing heat pumps." And I'm like, "What, you mean chillers?" And he went, "Well, yeah, but in heating." So I got into them by mistake and did about 18 months with him. And then some friends of mine have an air conditioning distribution company. And Samsung came to them and said, "We've got this air source heat pump. We literally don't know what to do with it. Do you want to flog it?" And they ran me up and said, "Do you want to set up a distribution company?" I went, "That was what I always wanted to do." So I got into heat pumps off the back of aircon.
Wow, okay.
And it was lovely, incredible luck. Everyone says it was hard work. It wasn't hard work, it was luck. So great bit of kit on day 1, a brand that people have heard of.
Samsung, right?
Yeah. So, mega brand, so everyone's heard of it, but not in heat pumps, just generally. And they let us do what we like, just sell the bloody thing. So I still have the world's oldest Samsung heat pump in my garage in the Museum of Heat Pumpery. Don't come and see it. It's not worth.
Does it still work?
Yeah, it's still.
Is it plumbed in or not?
No. I fire it up every now and again just to prove it. They do work 15 years later. And it was a bit of a wild west in the early days, so totally unregulated.
So what year was this?
2009, 10.
So the first Samsung air-to-water heat pump come out sort of
2009, yeah.
I'm sure they were around other brands, but it was and that was in the UK.
Yeah, so Daikin were already here for a few years before, and there were the odd weird heat pumps, but very niche.
Yeah.
But Mitsubishi were doing well. They was market leader then. So
what was the purpose of the Samsung heat pump? So when Samsung turned around to you and said, "We'd like you to sell this," who were you selling to in 2010? Who was buying them?
Well, so our first thing we did is we contacted everyone we knew in air conditioning and said, lads, there's going to be a load of money in this. Got to get into it. I remember doing a launch. About 60 of them turned up. Not a single one of them ended up being my customer.
Okay.
So we basically started looking for plumbers and so on. And it was tiny. The industry was tiny then. So if you were in heat pumps, everyone knew who you were.
But why were you? What was the purpose for anyone to buy one then? Because gas wasn't even, there wasn't talk of phasing out. Was it just an alternative to gas? Or if you didn't have a gas supply, heat pumps are your solution?
A little bit of that, but also the sort of early adopter green people. Yeah, there was, and there have been for years, people who are just green, people who got solar thermal 30 years ago. So we had them.
Vegan shoes, vegan underpants.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything which is, okay.
Yeah. And they were our customer base. So, sort of very green people. But as a distributor, we never met them. So we met the contractors, and we've met a few people who've been into wind power and so on. They thought, we'll do heating as well. So most of my customers were not really heating companies or cooling companies. They were kind of doing it on the side of PV. So for the first few years, it was great fun, but literally no idea what we were doing.
Okay.
MCS came in, when was that? 2012, 13, and started giving us
So in 2012, so for knowledge for myself, so when 2012 came in, I remember it coming in and it was worth something then. But what was the driver then? Because it wasn't gas phase out in 2012, was it?
No, it was.
Was it just an incentive to install a green product in your house?
Well, the weird thing was at the beginning there was no incentive. You literally didn't get anything. But MCS kind of told us how to do stuff and said they were going to bring in this thing called the Renewable Heat Initiative, which was a grant.
The RHI.
Yeah, RHI. And when you looked at it, it transformed the market because suddenly it's gone from you're buying a bit of a weird, expensive boiler, which is only green, doesn't really, did save you a bit of money then in run cost, but not much, to suddenly we're going to give you a load of money. And in the early days of RHI, it was huge.
What was it?
So it was done on, you got paid per kilowatt hour. So the bigger the system, the more you got.
So was this tying into solar panels as well?
Yeah, so they were doing the fit.
Because the buyback used to be fantastic as well on the power. And I think if you've still got an old, I think they've scrapped the RHI now, haven't they?
Yeah, RHI's gone. Yeah.
I still had a few clients in the last sort of 5-10 years, which, their systems are like 15 years old and they were on the original RHI.
Yeah.
And they were like, it was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, if you did the solar back then, I decided not to get into solar because I don't have money.
Yeah.
If you put them back then, you're getting 50p a kilowatt hour for everything that goes out of the roof and still getting it now. So it was an amazing investment. But with heat pumps, they paid you. So all they did is they looked at your house, look at your EPC, type it in, says on there that your house uses 20,000 kilowatt hours of heat, and they paid you per kilowatt hour. So they just give you, it didn't matter if you used it or didn't use it or efficiency, nothing. It's just here's your money. But within 2 years, it was blooming obvious that all we were doing, all of us, was going for people who had huge systems. So if you needed 4 heat pumps, happy days.
Fantastic.
So they changed that and capped it, which moved us down the market a bit. And what we found was that our customers needed advice on this grants, that not just heating and so on. So we became I like to say we were a delicatessen.
Okay.
So you come to me, we would design the system, we'd work all the maths out for you, give you all the bits of paper you had to do. And so, we got a load of people in because we had a reputation that we'd just hold your hand.
Yeah.
And then it sort of got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. RHI ended, blimey, I don't know when it was, 5-6 years ago. And they brought in the bus.
Yep.
And the bus is a simpler system. Basically, you just get one chunk of money at the front, no matter how big the unit is. So it's, again, pushed the size of the unit down. It's more advantageous to put small units in.
What was the cost? Not that I want to digress too much from your sort of what you're doing today, but the cost of a heat pump in 2010 versus the cost of it now.
It's doubled.
The cost has doubled for a heat pump now.
I remember, really remember it well. When we launched EcoBuild in 2011, we had a Samsung monoblock 8 kilowatt unit. Might have been a 9 kilowatt then. And Donald Dorr turned up from Mitsubishi, the boss of Mitsubishi. I've known him for years from Daikin.
4 or 5 grand now, I suppose, right?
Well, yeah, but then I was flogging that unit for 1,500 quid plus VAT.
No, you weren't.
No problem. And he said to me, my God, that's a good price.
What?
1,500 plus VAT for a 9 kilowatt unit. That unit is now 4 grand.
Wow.
But the paint's got a lot more expensive over the years.
It has, yeah. And the trips have stopped. The Vegas trips are now. That's really, you know what's really interesting? So we are dabbling with wholesale at the minute. We have got a wholesale business, the HVAC Buyers Club, which is a slightly different model to a wholesaler. But we are trying to find costs of products and how much the unit costs to make. And I reckon that the unit cost probably hasn't changed significantly. And I think this is where some of the Chinese brands are coming in, and predominantly the quality control of Chinese brands were never there, but they are getting a lot better, quicker. And you can sort of see why they can afford to flood the market, because I think they're still, I reckon you could, an 8 kilowatt for £1,500 is ludicrous.
Well,
but when you look at it at 4 grand now, for me to be in the industry for 10 years selling AC, you see it as marginal increases. But what people don't realise, and a lot of people don't realise this, but when you have a 3% increase on kit per year, well, you times that by 10.
It compounds. Yeah.
It compounds significantly.
But you can do that. Research is dead easy to do. So recently I had a really weird job where someone wanted a heat pump put in a quite tight space. So I was after a unit top discharged. And no one does them in the UK. And a company contacted me, said, we're launching one, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be about 3,500.
I think I've seen this on your internet. You've sort of mildly promoted it because it's actually pretty good.
Oh, yeah, that was another premium one. But this is a cheaper one. And a mate of mine said, I found the unit. It's on madeinchina.com.
Alibaba.
And I can buy that for $1,400.
Wow.
From China, but with no regulation. It's got no CE marking. It's got, and I think that's where a lot of the cost has come. To get your unit.
Regulation.
Yeah, I mean, if you want the grant, your unit has to be tested and MCS accredited, and that costs a few quid every unit. So. And there's too many people in the chain. I mean, this is what will get sorted out. All the way from the factory to the installer, there can be 5, 6, 7 people, and
that's where that 1,500 gets to 4,000.
Yeah, everyone takes their cut. That's coming down a lot. It used to be quite high.
Okay,
but I'm with you. I mean, I'll give you an example. If you type in, and I'm not picking on Mitsubishi, it's just I know the numbers.
It's right. If you pick on them, we'll just edit the video.
That's fine. But I can buy a 14 kilowatt Mitsubishi aircon condensing unit for a couple of grand. I can buy a 14 kilowatt heat pump for 4 grand. And you go, okay, what's the difference? Well, one of them's got a heat exchanger in that costs $100. And you go, they say it's development cost. And you go,
there is a difference in a manufacturer's defence, Mitsubishi's defence. The EcoDan 14 kilowatt is double the size of a 14 kilowatt. The coil's bigger.
Yeah.
I know you're loading up your questions ready to fire back. The fan motor's bigger. There's probably more acoustic insulation to keep the decibels down.
Yeah, but you can buy a lot of lagging and coil for 2 grand. And I'm not picking on Mitzi because I did Samsung for years, and I know that when back in the old days, it was the same unit, exactly the same unit, with a heat exchanger. Bloody expensive, those heat exchangers apparently. And they're saying it's development cost. But the development was done 10 years ago. You've sold thousands. I do think, and I have spoken to people at unmentionable manufacturers who tell me we are charging what we can get away with.
I see. Which believe it or not, we could talk about this, but when they mentioned the phase out of R410A, every distributor were a bunch of crooks. R410A went up from 120 quid for 9 kilos to 760 in the matter of months. And why? Because all the suppliers went, let's see how much we can get away with. It's back down now to like 150 to 180 quid a 9 kilos, and it's the same thing. They can get away with it, and that's where sometimes when you have new brands or the Chinese entering the market, it does make people reconsider. The only thing, that the old saying, price is what you pay, value is what you get.
Yeah.
Sometimes a premium product doesn't necessarily mean it's the best product, and I know you would agree with this, especially doing what you do and being the delicatessen. The value is in the after service, and when it goes wrong, and replacing units immediately. Whereas some of the smaller manufacturers, I could use Samsung as an example. You were obviously done very well because Samsung have never, they're getting there. They're still a few years away, in my opinion. You did them a huge favour because you took a huge problem away. You brought a product to market and said, listen, we'll deal with the technical, we'll design. Yeah. You can't. You can try, but we'll do it quicker and we can grow quicker. Whereas, if you're another brand, I don't know, Hitachi, owned by JCI, I think they've just sold JCI. There's probably one tech guy in the UK. And it's like, well, the product, and I'm sure you've come across Hitachi products, but if you talk, me speaking to people in the industry, Hitachi got some really good products.
I always say Hitachi. I distributed Hitachi. Hitachi make arguably the best air conditioning and heat pumps on the market, but they're like Saab. They're brilliant, and no one buys them.
What a great comparison! And poor marketing. The marketing budget is like £10,000 a year. Yeah. They rely on the distributors, but distributors can only do so much, and it's trying to get it into people's throats or think of the product being that much better. But Saab is a great Have you seen the black Hitachi cassette that they do?
Yes, beautiful.
It's when we move up, we're putting Hitachi cassettes in. However, you mention it to a contractor or a consultant, Hitachi, and they just go, ooh.
But I think you've got to remember there's 30, 40 years of Daikin and Mitzi going around speaking to contractors, forming relationships.
Yeah, and brand building.
Yeah,
brand
brilliant.
building. Yeah.
And Hitachi haven't done that very well. So product-wise, amazing, but no one knows about it. And it is weird, but... And you're dead right. After sales for me, I was trained in Daikin back in the day. It was all about after sales. And I remember my boss at Pillinger Air telling me, he said, no matter who you are, if you ring and you've got a Daikin unit, we'll help you because you'll buy the next one off me. And he was dead right.
That's really interesting you say that. So somebody that you would have dealt with, again, I don't know the ins and outs of the company, but I had this problem. So Space Air were a nightmare. And that's probably one of the reasons they downfall, because there was arrogance. So they rebadged their condensers. They were ER numbers instead of RX. And if you rang up and you didn't have an account, they wouldn't give you any technical help. But that compounded through the industry because it used to cheese off so many engineers.
But in the early days, it did the same as us. Yeah, I think a lot of that might have happened after Daikin bought the other three. So Daikin bought 3 of the 4 distributors, didn't buy Space.
Okay.
So there then was this kind of behemoth over here.
Oh, there was an us and them, yeah. Okay.
Whereas when they had 4 distributors, so all single brand, couldn't sell anything else. You had somewhere else to go. If you ran
competition.
If you ran Space and they didn't help you, you'd ring cooling services. They would. They want the order. And I still maintain. I'll say it till I die. It was the worst decision Daikin ever made. They were the superstars of air conditioning until they bought everyone.
I see.
And now you just go, you've got one phone number, one bunch of people. If you don't like them, you have to go to Mitzi or, whatever. I think it's...
They can do a few distributors with a few tech.
Yeah, but it's not like it was.
I know what you're saying. You've got 3 or 4 powerhouses, which can offer you almost the same service. You've got more than one, so you've got more of a capitalistic approach rather than you can only go one place. There's plus sides and downsides of both, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think corporate wise, it's probably easier to have everything in house to control things.
Yeah. But there's a little bit now of. Back in the bad old days, Mitzi had a couple of distributors, Daikin had a few. Now there's hundreds, and I remember when I started with Samsung, and they said we're not going to support it. You've got to do it. I went, good, because I don't want you to support it.
Good. We have a similar mindset because I believe if you're that old saying, there's probably a few people watching this which actually do the opposite of what you're saying. All the sales and none the service is just like. There's just like no accountability to whereas if you're selling a product and then you're actually supporting it, it's win-win, but there's accountability there and you can grow with it.
Well, I always said it's the difference between I'm very lucky. I shop in Waitrose. I love Waitrose. It's lovely. They treat me really nicely. They charge me £1.50 for a can of beans, which I can get in Asda for 70p. But I don't want to go in Asda. I want the service. I want to feel like I'm loved. I like talking to someone at the till. I know they'll back me up. If you don't want that, that's okay. Yeah, there's other places to go. But if I was back in distribution again, I can't go back for a while, I would go 100%. It's all about service. I remember doing a survey 10 years ago. We asked our customers, why did you buy off us? And we thought they were going to go because you're all good looking and, amazing. And they said, you are the only distributor that guarantees spare parts on the shelf will be there 24 hours.
Did you hold spare parts?
Everything.
Fantastic.
Every part for everything. Because if I'm honest, it's because I don't like being shouted at. And if I sold you a year...
I have the same thing.
Yeah.
I have the same thing. Sometimes to be like, we haven't got the part, we'll replace it.
Yeah.
Or that, oh, really? Yeah, it's fine, we'll sort it, we've got you back. It's fine. We want you to continue to buy with us. We need to work with you. The big boys can't do that.
Well,
there's a lot of tape and emails and pain.
Yeah, exactly.
And anxiety of, costs.
But I remember once going to pick up a fan motor for an aircon unit. I went to my distributor and when I was an installer, and I got there and I said, I'm here to pick up that fan motor. And they said, the parts lady's on lunch, so you can't have it till she gets back because she's got to fill the form in. I went, yeah, but can I just take the motor and put it on the account? They went, no, not till she's back. So I sat there for an hour. She came back and handed me the fan motor. And I remember distinctly going, when I run my firm, we're not doing that. That's just have the bits, get it fixed. We'll talk about the money.
I was about to say to you, don't have lunch. just no lunch.
Skip lunch.
No lunch.
Yeah.
No lunch.
Yeah, it's weird. So I like service, and I hope I gave service. I'm sure some people watching this will go, yeah, he's talking rubbish. He shafted us, and well, yeah, sorry if I did. But we tried our best, and I think we did look after people and change units. And I think there is still a model of that. It's still, and I actually think there aren't many people doing that.
Okay. So with your experience with heat pumps, the next question I want to work out is, are heat pumps for everyone? So I'll give you an example. I saw a post an engineer put up on the internet recently. You might have seen it. Wasn't a big hit, but I don't understand why people are still putting in gas boilers. I've just quoted for a heat pump and they've gone ahead and replaced it with a gas boiler. Are we even going to go to heat pumps? Are people stupid? Yada, 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 yada. So going to the question of heat pumps for everyone. So in 2012, I think this is where we can hit on the RHI. So in 2011, 2012, 2013, there was an RHI, there was an incentive, there was a financial gain, and there was a bit of a payback for a client to say, I'm not going to put a boiler in. Well, now we're in 2024. Yes, we know net zero by 2030, 2035, 2050, whatever. And there's a big push for electrification. Whether you want to cut less personal emissions, let's put that to one side. The heat pump market is gearing up. I speak to the manufacturers. They're like, it's going to get bigger. I'm on the other side. I'm like, I think it's going to slow down. Unless the costs are significantly less. From then to now, heat pumps, who are they for at the moment? Like residential-wise, why have a heat pump and who are they for?
No, it's a really good question. So one of the things that we as an industry forget is heating is boring, right? Here's a question for you. When did you last actually see your boiler?
I actually have a heat pump. But looking at it, yeah.
Days ago.
Yeah.
And if you've got a boiler, it's in a cupboard. I haven't seen it for 6 months. So nobody thinks about the heating until the day it stops. And the problem, so imagine you got home, imagine you had a combi boiler. You got home tonight, the heating's packed up. And you go, okay, that thing's knackered, it's old, it needed changing. You can ring a plumber and go, mate, can you come round tomorrow or the next day, get a new boiler, get it on the wall, get me up and running. You'll have heating on by the weekend. It's very difficult to do that with the current structure with heat pumps. It could be done, but it isn't. Yeah, it takes weeks. And because it takes weeks, what that means is you've got to think, when I'm changing my boiler in a year, I'm going to go heat pump. Let's start the motions now. So we think as an industry that the general public find this exciting. I can assure you they don't. None. Yeah, if you want to clear a bar, tell them you work in
Yeah,
heat
of
pumps.
course.
So right now it's for people who are thinking about greening their house. They've just bought a new house. They want to make it more efficient. We get a lot of them. We get new build.
Do you want to bring that a bit forward?
Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
We get new build, of course. So we get still the green people, but not quite as sandal weary as they used to be.
Okay.
Tesla owners. If you buy a Tesla, you are telling me you're being green. Yeah, so you probably you're electrifying your house. If you're, the average person.
Well, Tesla owners, yes and no. So I would, once upon a time, I'd agree with you and say yes, and they tend to have Apple Watches, and they road cycle. Sorry, it's a stereotype, which unfortunately it's hand in hand. Tax incentives and company car tax. So a lot of Tesla owners, they don't have heat pumps anymore because they say, well, I was offered a company car. The Tesla was £150 to £200 a month, but the diesel, whatever, was £500.
Yeah. No, I get you on that as well. It has changed a bit, but people who are green. What we did see 5 years ago with Greta Thunberg, I like Greta a lot. She made me a lot of money. Lots of people bringing their kids with them, and they're going, Dad, Mum, we need to do something about our carbon, which is cool. So it has still got a green tinge to it. One of the things I find weird is trying to sell things to people who don't want them is really hard. So I think you should make your choice. And I know it's not a very trendy thing to say, but if you don't want a heat pump, don't buy one. Yeah, buy a boiler. If that's what you want to do, that's okay. Well, there's a few people out there going, you should be made to have one. You go, what a great way to kill an industry, make them have something. Heat pumps should be so good that you're saying to me, bloody hell, when this boiler goes, I'm definitely getting a heat pump. It's the new thing.
For sure.
Yeah, combi boilers did that. Yeah, my parents bought a combi because they could get rid of the cylinder, they could get rid of the old gas boiler. I guess before I was born, they got rid of the coal fire and bought a gas boiler.
Space, right? Saving space.
So there's always been a reason, and if we can't think of a good enough reason to have a heat pump, you shouldn't be beating people with a stick to make them have it. That's never going to work.
Do you feel like that's that beating of the stick? I feel like it's calmed a bit. If we were sitting here 2 years ago, Graham, we wouldn't be sitting here because you'd be too busy. Because it was hot social media, hot everything, and it was pretty much rammed down people's throats. Yeah. Do you think it's calmed?
Yeah, weirdly, a few people. There was a little army of them, and I used to love winding them up on LinkedIn. But there was an army of them going, "I'm the expert. You're having what I want. I don't care. It's your house."
Okay.
And then I went, guys, what we could do is we could ask them what they wanted and sell them that.
Okay.
So there's still a little bit of this, you will have your radiators stone cold because you get an amazing efficiency. I don't want stone cold radiators.
For sure.
I'm happy to pay 20% more. Ask them, what do they want? So that's changed and it is a lot better. There's still a few nutters out there, and I'll say I'm a nutter too because I'd go the other way. I like warm rads because I don't get a bollocking off my wife for having cold rads.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's changed a bit. Who's buying them? Definitely, most people are still buying combi boilers and whatever because they're easy. Yeah, let's do the maths really simply. I reckon you could get a bloke in or a lady to change your boiler from combi to combi, 3-4 grand, maybe 5 if it's a nice one. Nobody is going to put your heat pump in for 5 grand. Those days, unless you're really, really lucky, or you're, in my case, the plumber's your son, and he puts it in, cheap. So you're already asking for more money. And we are in exactly the same place that electric cars were in 10 years ago.
So the question on the back of that, because we've actually done a video on this, a very old video, it's very hard to capture, but we worked out that if you had a gas boiler replaced, the electricity costs more, but obviously the COP is less. Like boilers, like 1 to 1 point something, whereas heat pumps 1 to 3, 4, 5. That's another debate or another question to go through. It still worked out a lot cheaper to have a replacement boiler in 10 years' time than it was to replace your heat pump. But the question I've got for you then, based on that, if we're going to assume that to replace your combi is going to cost between 3 and 4K, is there ever going to be a chance in our generation or in the next 5 years that a heat pump can go in for 4K?
I think it's definitely a target we should work towards. I don't see... Lots have got to change because, really simple example, mate, he buys his boiler, turns around, sticks it on the wall, fills in one bit of paper or a couple of bits of paper, it's done. Because of the grant, of course, it's very heavily regulated, and there's a lot of people rail about this, going, it's too heavily regulated. You go, guys, they're giving you $7 grand. They're not just going to turn up with a suitcase of cash and give it to you. There's got to be accountability.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when the grants have gone, which I can't wait for, get them gone.
Free capitalist rather than trying to have to force certain products in. And
you're then going to, as you said, you're going to get these units coming from China, and the Chinese are doing very well. I mean, I did a bit of work with Midea just as I was leaving Freedom. There are currently 12 Midea units with different badges on across the board.
I know.
We call them the Midea clones.
Yeah.
All different prices.
They're all doing that, by the way.
Yeah,
it's not just them.
No,
it's not just them.
I think it's brilliant that you can buy one particular brand.
Well, that is really good, actually, because you've got 12 different variants, because once upon a time, it'd only be one variant, and a Chinese product would be a nightmare for parts.
Yeah.
But now it's so flooded in the market, there's probably enough of it everywhere to...
Well, the cheapest one is 14 kilowatts. The cheapest one is 1,500 quid cheaper than the most expensive. It's exactly the same unit.
And the efficiency, even if the efficiency is 10 to 50% less, you're never going to spend 1,500 quid.
It's the same unit. It's exactly
Oh,
the same.
sorry, you're saying that the 12 variants, one is £1,500 more.
Yeah.
So you're paying for brand. I see.
The badge is nicer.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And
I could probably guess the badge. I reckon it begins with. I think it begins with B and it's German. But there you go.
I'm
but
not
no,
allowed
okay.
to talk about that.
No, okay. Well, but no, even comparing against different brands, that's really good for me to know, because I always saw cheaper brands or a Chinese brand, and be like, I ain't putting that crap in my house. But are you suggesting that heat pumps are pretty much all about the same now?
Ish. So like anything, it's a bell curve. So there is a thing as a database that you can go on called the MCS product database. And if you're very sad, like me, you download it every 6 months and you order the units. And what's nice is the efficiency is getting slowly better.
Okay.
Which is good. If you look at the top 10, there's 4,000 units on there. The top 10, they are up there. They're mega efficient. Once you get into 10 downwards, to 200, it's all the same. So everything by Mitzi, Valent, so on, Daikin, they're all in the
top
board.
10.
None of them are in the top 10. The top 10 are all really niche brands.
I see.
So
where they've got advanced controls, because that's what seems to be heat pumps. Weissman might have a product in there. They may, just because they've got really clever controls.
It turns out it's just they've got bigger evaporators and bigger fans. That's it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Drop the
just to get. I'm with you.
The great big coil, big fan. You get efficiency.
We're the same with chillers. The more efficient the chillers, unfortunately, the bigger they are.
Yeah, if I could find a 10 kilowatt unit the size of a shoebox with a high efficiency and it was silent, I'd be done very well. But as we said earlier, you can't get through all three. You can have noisy or small or
for sure
efficient.
Have you ever done a cost comparison between the top 10 and then the 10 to 50?
Yeah, that's what I do now. That is my job. So,
what's your favourite then?
Well, the best.
So if we were going to say we're going to put a heat pump into someone's house, maybe someone can do this for 5k. If they can. Well, is it possible with one of these lower products?
You'd have to persuade your Sparky and electrician to charge sensible amounts of money, and also let me give an example.
Can 9 kilowatt heat pump not work on a 13 amp plug? I know it's pushing it, but we have some temporary cooling units which are 9 kilowatt in certain conditions, a bit like a heat pump, that run on 13 amp plugs.
It can. Obviously, the electrical reg says it's got to be wired properly, but I test heat pumps. So I run them all off an extension lead.
Here we go.
Right?
Yeah.
And they work fine, of course.
9 kilowatt?
Yeah, 9 kilowatts is fine. So it draws about just under 3 if you don't push it too hard. And you can limit them all and so on. But I test that. I don't like testing in the cold, so I test them on hard days. So, yes, the electrics could be cheaper. I mean, so in my house, I was very lucky. The boiler was right on the outside wall of the house, flew up high. So it was literally boiler off, tubes through the wall, drop them down, heat pump underneath. Very simple to tube. Of course, if yours is 25 metres under the back garden.
Yeah, for sure. It's a bit different.
So I think cheaper units, they are all much too complicated. Every single one I've ever worked on, much too complicated.
Really?
Yeah, the controls are horrible on every unit.
Even cheaper units?
Yeah, the controls...
Because I feel like my ideal heat pump is a swimming pool heat pump from China.
Yeah.
Because them swimming pool heat pumps that you buy, you literally just plug in the flow and return, and you just press up and down. You set the temperature, and that's it. And the only time you look at it is if it trips on a low pressure fault or no flow. That's it.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, obviously, the only problem with swimming pool heat pumps, they don't work in low ambience.
Okay.
Because they're not designed for it, don't have any defrost. But parking that, I have a joke that if you're a controls engineer, say you're a computer programmer and you're good, then you want a job at Tesla or Apple. If you're not very good, you get a job designing controls in heat pumps. Because they are, I mean, I used to scream at Samsung about this. I said, I've got a Samsung mobile phone, multicolour, multi-language, video, a child can drive it.
Yeah.
And then I've got my Samsung controller on my heat pump,
I'm
which
with you.
looks like a calculator and has weird symbols. I said, that's what we need is easy controls, easy to use. And yeah, for instance, I'm a bit of a fan of Ideal at the moment.
Why?
The controller's stupidly easy. I always said it put me out of a job.
So do you know, I'm not going to say it because I don't think I'm allowed to, but do you know what heat pump that is?
Yeah, I know exactly what heat pump
What does it begin with?
Well, the one I've got is made
Because they have two.
Yes, one is made by Fujitsu and the other one is made by one of the clones.
Which one do you have? Do you
I have the Fujitsu. Yeah. And it's a great unit.
He said it. So,
the controller...
I've heard it's a good unit.
It's bloody amazing.
From Mr. Dean Flint's mouth. He said it's a great unit and it's simple.
But what Ideal have done, which is very clever, is they've taken that base unit and they've built the indoor controls to be very simple. So it looks like a thermostat,
right,
up and down.
Really
easy. They've done the same with their MIDI. So they rip it to bits, rebuild it, very simple. And they've done something that made me really laugh. I come from a world where the terminals are all labelled like B1, B2, B3, and you know that the pump goes in 6 and 7. What they've done is labelled it pump.
Oh, wow.
And you go,
that's
witchcraft.
technical. Yeah, of course, yeah.
And I'm like, where does the controller go? You go, well, in the one labelled controller. And you go, okay. And I'm thinking...
So that is, okay, excuse the pun, ideal.
Yeah.
But that potentially is an ideal solution for installation.
It was made, so that machine has been very much targeted as it is a boiler that lives in the garden.
I see.
And so that is beginning to pull the price down where people go, it's not that complex all of a sudden.
So something like that, we'll look at design in a second, but if a design was simplified and you had let's use the ideal heat pump, everything's labelled, and you could run it off a 13 amp plug, okay, with a flow and return. If it died in 10 years' time, you could just swap it out. Yep. That's probably the only way we can get to... Because the thing that... And I'd like to ask you on this, because I've been quite pessimistic on this. If I installed a Samsung heat pump, or maybe a Mitsubishi or Fujitsu 15 years ago, say the compressor's gone, I want to replace the heat pump, I now have to change the indoor controller as well, and probably most of the sensors.
So
which unfortunately, is going to cost you another $8,000. Yeah,
I mean, so there's a couple of weirdities there. So first off, then mostly monoblocks in the UK, so splits are a nightmare because you have to change everything. But on a monoblock, as a rule, you've got the box in the garden with a flow and return, a power supply and a cable.
Yep.
So you could easily change that. The electrics box inside, some have them, some don't. Size of a bit of A3 paper. Yeah, you've probably got to change that. The bizarre thing is that if you change it, you don't get the grant because you're not removing a fossil fuel.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
So the replacement market for heat pumps has kind of gone, but it is much cheaper because there's no plumbing, there's no wiring. You know, so Sparky turns up for half a day and wires the cables in, and the plumber plugs the tubes in, and it's done. So it's much, much cheaper than a full install. Bizarrely, because there is no grant, there's no point doing the paperwork. There's no point. You go, did the old unit work? Yeah, okay, then the new unit will work. You don't, like a boiler, you don't go around when you change a boiler and check everything. You go, was it warm? They go, yeah. You go, okay, new boiler then. So again, we do have this much more complicated process because, and it was done because back in the day, people made a mess of it.
Yeah, okay.
I teach this at college in aircon design. If you were an awful contractor, you'd come in here, you go 120 watts a meter, Bosch 4 kilowatt cassette, done, right? You may do the full sun path and all that kind of stuff. Breaks your heart because it works at 120 watts a meter. You can't do that so easily with your heating.
Oh, okay.
So, a new build house is a very different heat load to a Victorian house.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say, I've got a 3-bedroom, what heat pump do I want? You go, well, how old a 3-bedroom? So I've moved from a 1922 house with 100 metre square floor area with 9 kilowatts to a 1990 house with 180 square metre floor area, same heat loss.
Same heat, okay.
So you can't just kind of go 3-bedroom unit, 4-bedroom unit, and so on. But it's not that hard.
But so what you're saying is again, if you've got gas boiler, it's irrelevant. But there is a potential market for replacements in the future, because if you're swapping a 9 kilowatt with a 9 kilowatt,
in it goes.
Okay.
I mean, I don't.
So it's almost like, and this is when new builds come into effect, where people are having they're having these heat pumps installed by the house builder, and they're buying a property with it already in.
Yeah.
So really, if there's thousands of them out there, which there obviously is now, the replacement market, if they've simplified the replacement, that would contribute to the churn of the industry to keep the momentum going. Because in my opinion, the momentum is slowing down based on what it's usually cost. It's and that's unfortunately everything, isn't it? Unless you are Mr. Green. But if Mr. Green's means you've got less money in your pocket,
it's difficult.
It is difficult.
No, I mean, there is no question a boiler is cheaper to put in. Right now, it's a very similar run cost. You can make your heat pump cheaper to run by pushing it and so on, but it's about the same run cost. So even with the grant, you're paying more. It's a difficult decision to make if you're not green. And the timescale. I mean, I have a job that we're working on, been talking to this lady for 4 months about a heat pump. A boiler broke down. She had a boiler installed over the weekend. And we went, what happened there? Yeah. And we lost her.
Okay.
And so, that has to be... if I was back in the game trying to flog again, I would be working solely on how do I catch the bloke whose boiler's broken and go, we've got your unit. It's in. There is a little bit of an idea some people are doing, which is called heat pump ready. So what they're saying is, look, if your boiler's on its last legs, why don't you get an isolator put on the outside wall where the heat pump's going to go? Get the sparky in at your leisure, get that done. Why not make sure you've got the plinth ready and bring some tubes out?
Okay.
And then when you're ready to go, it's out in a
That's still that's still a lot of convincing on a big scale.
Yeah, it's hard.
Because why? Like if you had said that to me, I'd be like, no, I'm all right, thanks, mate.
No, I'm with you. It's nothing wrong with my boiler. It works, so I'm going to keep it.
I think again, we can go through this shortly, but cost is king with a lot of things.
Yeah.
So if you were to say, well, your gas boiler replacement's costing you $4,000, we're going to do it for $5,000.
You're on a back foot.
Yeah.
If you can go to the customer and say a boiler's $4,000, it's $2,000. They go, tell me a little bit more about this new technology. You look at electric cars, people buy them because they're cheap to run. So they go, I'll have one. Yeah, or the tax bills.
And there's a few incentives,
Yeah, so there is an incentive, but it's been absorbed into the cost of the units, and the costs have gone up. It always does.
So putting that to one side with the cost and let's look at the design, because we do a lot of chillers, and we're doing heat pump chillers, and you're going to be able to correct me if I'm wrong on anything. So you've got, if we do a standard chiller with a heat pump chiller, primary loop with a thermal store, a buffer vessel, and then we have a secondary cylinder. So for those that don't understand that, and I hope I'm clear, is the water does not mix. You have a coil inside a buffer, and then you have a body of water that surrounds that, which is then circulated around the building. The second type we do, which is much more efficient, but it needs a bit of tweaking, and if it has a lot of single point of failures. If we were to have, say, 3 AHUs with cooling and heating coils with 3-port valves, we would design something called a constant volume system, where you don't actually... we actually still put buffers on them because our manufacturers tell us we have to have a minimum litres per second. So we'll get our consultant to design a buffer, but it'll just be a primary cylinder. Flow and return, just a flow. Flow in the top, flow at the bottom, gets pumped round. If there's no demand, 3-port valves closed, the water circulates. It's much more efficient.
Bypass,
with a bypass. However, if things don't operate correctly, like the flow is incorrect, we on our equipment tend to have external pumps because the pumps in the chillers aren't sufficient to deal with a buffer. It's slightly cheaper to install, but the efficiency is in the install. But if it's not commissioned correctly and it's not treated correctly, it's actually a really bad system because you're going to have internal corrosion and it's never going to work properly. You won't get your efficiency. So with the constant volume system, it seems cheaper because you haven't got the need for a big buffer.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's so much heat, and I know you've been involved with the conversations because I've watched them, and there is no right or wrong, because, in my opinion, because a constant volume system might be more efficient, but if it's open to more risk for things not working or things, there's a lot of assumptions, the buffer selection is probably the safest bet.
Yeah, it's exactly the same on a smaller scale, smaller buffer.
So the two questions I've got for you on that is, one, in a residential heat pump, what's cheaper, secondary or constant volume? And two, on a grand scale, if having a constant volume without the buffer we're able to do it, is that going to help reduce that cost of £5,000?
Yeah, so we call it a different name. We call it an open system.
Okay.
Right? So I'll briefly explain how it works. In my house, there are 10 radiators. I have one thermostat. When I turn my thermostat on, all 10 radiators get hot. Heat pump starts, pumps the water around. It's directly connected to those radiators, so I can see all of the water in the house from the heat pump all the time.
No bypass?
They tend not to put one. You can put them in, but tend not to, because the rads, you tell the customer, don't adjust the rads.
Fine.
Right. So the advantage is it's cheap, it's easy, it's fast, it's what's already there, it works. The disadvantage is that Mrs. Miggins turns around, all homeowners are called Mrs. Miggins, obviously.
Yep.
She turns off 4 radiators. Now you've upset the flow through the system, you've upset the volume through the system, so we have no flexibility for that. It's a fully open system.
Do you mean flexibility as in you need the pump to adjust itself, or you mean the way the system is piped, you need the water to continue to flow through that primary?
Yeah, you need the volume that's in those rads, and you need the fact that, if you think radiators are just in parallel, if you shot 3 off, you reduce the flow rate, you increase the resistance. So if you've got a customer who doesn't mind that the whole house gets hot together, in our house that's perfect, because it's fairly open, so it's fine. It works beautifully. And if they don't fiddle with it, it's perfect. If you are fortunate enough to live in a house with an east wing and a west wing, or a first, second, third, fourth floor, it's likely that you might only want to heat one floor at a time.
Okay.
And if you want to do that, your flow rate changes enormously from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 floors. In that case, we use a buffer. So we hydraulically separate, we call it.
Okay.
Same thing, So the way I look at it is the heat pump's job is to heat the buffer up, and the buffer heats the house.
Okay.
Which is correct depends on your house. Which is best depends on your house.
On an efficiency, for the people that say, I get a 6 COP on my heat pump, I take it the single system is the way forward.
Allegedly, if you balance the buffer properly, it's exactly. So if you balance the flow across the buffer doesn't exist.
Okay.
So you lose no efficiency. And a lot of people are running 3-legged buffers, so the return passes the buffer.
I see.
So you don't get mixing. We used not to. We used to run all 4 pipes in loads of mixing. It was horribly inefficient. So it's only inefficient because the water mixes up. You have to run it hot.
For sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So a well-balanced system in any configuration is what you want. I'm not a member of the COP Brigade.
Okay.
I find it utterly dull. It's miles per gallon.
So miles per gallon, yeah. So for me, the COP, there's a lot of people that are part of the COP Brigade, and I completely understand it. My plus sides with it is, we want to be pushing for the best COPs.
Yeah.
Fact. For me, my challenge is this, is where are you getting the COP from? If you're getting the COP from the branded controller, I personally have questions about that, because miles per gallon Brigade, we can look at VW, what they did. If you're metering properly and you're getting the results on your COP, fantastic.
Yeah.
If you're part of that, if you're analysing that, it's perfect. For me, I say, well, how can we scale that? If you're trying to push heat pumps out to thousands of people, is the COP Brigade going to get us to where we need to be?
No.
Or for me, I like 1 to 3. I like a COP of 3. I know it might not be as good as a COP of 6, but if it's scalable, aircon, we always say, it's always the rule was for every kilowatt in, you get 3 kilowatts of heating or cooling out. Okay, at certain instances, it's probably running at 6 or 7, especially with air-to-air. However, you tell your client that they're saving, their energy bills are going to be reduced by up to, it's 600% efficient, and it doesn't. You're misleading the public, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that annoys me when people go, look at me, I've got a cop of 8, and I do the Carno maths and go, no, you haven't. It's a lie. Yeah, you can't beat Mr. Carno.
Yeah.
And you're dead right. The way you measure it in the machine, if I was measuring, I'd do exactly the same. You only measure the current drawn by the compressor, and you forget about all the other bits.
And it's probably sensor, because I know a lot of the heat pumps now, Mitzi of one of them, for example, they've smartened up a bit. They've gone, well, actually now, the way the unit machine runs is it just wants to maintain at 5 degrees across the heat exchanger. That's it. So if you get using them as an example, if you've got the COP measurement, you probably find it's just doing it from 2 sensors and current draw.
Yeah. And you make it up in an algorithm. That's how they're all done.
Okay.
So I have a COP measurement in my heat pump, and I'm sad. My house is covered in heat meters and proper electric meters. I can see where everything's going, and there is a big difference, about 1-ish. But there's weird things about COP. I try not to be too geeky. It's miles per gallon, right? Mm. So in August, my heat pump's not on. Right? It produces exactly 0 kilowatts of heat, but the power's on. Mm. So it's absorbing electricity. So I get a negative COP in August.
But it's still costing you money.
Yeah, it costs me money. And you go, so I'm getting a COP of less than 1 because I'm not producing any heat because the solar panels heat the water. Then you start up in September, and let's face it, it's not very cold outside, and the rads are not very warm. Mm-hmm. So you go, oh, look at me with my COP of 9, and you go, it's meaningless. This is you coasting downhill out of gear, going, look at me at 200 miles per gallon. If you keep telling people that, and then they get 40 miles per gallon over the year, they go, well, it's broken. It used to do 200.
We've actually seen that. We know, I'm not spoken to him, but someone that owns a heat pump company, and he's actually had a customer say, I'm not paying you my bill because energy has gone up his energy bill's gone up significantly. And then he's turned around and said, well, yes, electricity now costs more, and also you're now using more electric than you're using gas. You're not using gas. But there was that pretense of, well, I'm 400-500% efficient. But you look at it and it's not. It really isn't. So so is it? You obviously use the term COP brigade, but if you're part of the top brigade, brigade, and are you to say that if you want a COP of like 5 at home, you're probably going to feel a bit colder at night? Is it a bit like that? Or is it?
No, I mean, I can get you a COP of 5 across the whole year if you like. It's just you have to go on holiday in December, January, and February. And, and that's the thing. It's like saying I've got 150 miles to gallon because I don't drive my car up hills.
Okay.
So what you find with the COP lots, they're all on at the moment, all over it. COP of 8, 9, all that rubbish. None of them are doing that in January.
Okay. Why is that?
Well, because your difference between your condensing and evaporating temperature is huge. COP's 3 or something.
Okay.
And they never post.
Fine.
And you get the same when people go, heat pumps are really quiet. It's always done on warm days.
Yeah, of course.
Get out there in the snow.
And well, I appreciate you say that because I think they're noisy. Like even the ones that are, they're all about the same. Ones that are whisper quiet. You stand next to it and you hear it, but being told that you would hear it is a lot. With us, when we sell an aircon unit and they say, is it noisy? My saying has never changed for the last 10 years. It's not noisy, but it makes a noise.
Yeah.
So you'll stand there and you won't go, Strife, what's that noise?
No.
It's, I can hear it. Yeah, it's running, but, and explaining that, when you manage their expectations, when they've got the heat pump, they go, oh yeah, it does make a bit of a noise, doesn't it? Oh, it's all right, though, I'll live with it. Rather than this thing is whisper quiet. You won't hear it, and then goes back to the MPG brigade, the MPG where it was tested in a facility with the ambient of 40 degrees, and the fan isn't even running.
But I always say to people, we used to say, because back in the old days, we wanted to tell people how noisy they are, right? And you get all the videos, but the video doesn't capture the noise. So we used to say to people, we wandered around the office finding something the same noise level, and it turns out a microwave oven. A 10-year-old heat pump, microwave.
Good
similar
shout.
Noise.
I like it.
So we used to get people to take their microwave out in the garden, plug it in an extension lead, go, there it is. It's going to do that all the time. That's not true anymore. They're quieter than that now.
So are you saying that a new heat pump is quieter than a microwave oven?
It is indeed. That's the
What if you've got a really quiet microwave oven? Mate, you can't compare with that. Yeah.
But now it's more like, I would say, a desk fan.
Okay.
Yeah, so again, take your desk fan, stick it outside. It's going to make a noise. They're not silent, but actually now we've got them that they're quieter than your boiler flue.
Nice. Well, and that's an improvement when you're looking at coming off flue versus gas versus electric.
There you go. A little bit quieter than what you've got. Similar run cost to what you've got. All we've got to do is get the price down to the same. So I would like to see that. One of the things that annoys me about our sector, and it's because there's lots of money sloshing about, we do love to put a few accessories in. Yeah, all sorts of gubbins goes in, which increases the cost of the hardware, the install time and so on. And we need to get to the point, when you buy a combi boiler, you put it on the wall and you stick the tubes in and you go. That no one goes,
Are you suggesting that we should have the approach of the Argentine president? I think it's Melo, his name is, and he uses the word afuera. And he listed all the government departments.
Yeah.
And he just stood there and went afuera. And he ripped them all out and he left 5.
Yeah.
And he had saved millions and millions of dollars to the government by saying all these departments can go. So are you suggesting that, because this is what I really want to get to, if we have a £5,000 install for a heat pump, are you saying that if we fired a lot of these extra accessories which aren't needed and we stuck with either a buffer or a non-buffer, we could get to it?
Well, we could definitely in the right direction, because it is quite trendy now. You go, I'm going to put auto air vents in. You go, do you need them? Not really, but they're nice.
So what would you remove? If I was to say, Graham, I've got a project for you, I want to be able to offer the public a replacement, rip your boiler out, air source heat pump, £5,000. We're going to get a cheap product, which does what it says on the tin. The design, what design are we going for?
So design is a whole subject. I'll get to that in a second. But what would I move out of the machine? Do we really need the feet?
Okay.
Do we need flexi hoses? We did, because they used to vibrate.
Question, no manufacturer have got raised feet on them? Because that could be done during the manufacturing process.
Yeah, it could come with a little rubber block. No one's got them.
Manufacturers, if you're manufacturing something on a production line, make your feet bigger. Yeah, put some feet on them.
Well, you're thinking aircon. Aircon's the same. Hasn't got feet on. It's got the little feet.
We've got, as a business, we've got our own special feet, which are used.
Are they articulated?
No, they're not. They're we make them. We get them made. They're recycled hay bales.
Okay.
So the black covering.
Yeah.
It's almost like decking board, and it's a rubber. It's a quarter of the price of the standard flexi feet. Why do we use flexi feet? Because that's all that people use.
Yeah, but everyone's always used them. So I think
feet,
flexis.
What do you mean by flexis? Are these the flexis onto the back of the boilers?
Hoses, yeah.
Are they expensive?
They're more expensive than copper pipe.
Dare I say it as well? Because we dabble in a bit. We do a lot of mechanical work. A lot of water treatment companies don't like flexi pipes because they're not great for water treatment.
Chemicals. Well,
okay.
I think we use them because the units used to vibrate and shake the pipes in the wall. They don't anymore.
Okay, so flexi pipes feet can go, and you're saying AAVs potentially could be ditched.
Well, they use these big automatic air vents.
I know the ones, with the little red screws on the top.
I'm not sure you need them. You need a filter to take the crap out of the system.
But that could be done in the product.
I was thinking about it on the way here, actually. Why is the filter not in the machine?
Yeah.
I think we still need to move the water from heating to hot water. You still need the valves. Glycol, not sure you need that. They don't freeze up.
Our chillers are the same. We don't... it's crazy, because glycol was used all the time. And whenever we replace a chiller, the first thing that people say is there glycol? And we're like, no. And it's like, well, we need glycol in the system. You're like, why? Because it needs to protect it. From what? We have trace heating, and we also have low pressure switches to protect the unit from killing itself.
Yeah, well, that's again, it's a little bit of a we've always done it, no
that
one
way.
questions.
Okay.
So there's a little bit. I mean, one of the things that winds me up enormously is we run a 5-degree delta across the unit. So, for instance, 50 degrees out, 45 back.
Yep.
Your boiler runs a 20-degree delta.
Yeah.
Right. So 70 out, 50 back. What that means is the water is moving a quarter of the speed, which means that if you move water slowly, it's quiet, small pumps, small pipes.
Been that before.
So they're used to trickling the water around at a crawling pace.
I see.
We will move the water at basically a fast walking pace. So I need big pipes, big pumps. And I did a blog, the most successful blog I ever did. I said, why is it 5 degrees? And I got 20 different answers, all of which were rubbish. And the general consensus is that somebody one day went, 5 degrees is about right. And I have a heat pump I'm testing in my garage at the moment. You could adjust the delta.
Interesting.
So if you go to 7, 8, 9, then smaller pipes, and off you go.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I hope the CO2 boys have looked at your your blog, because we've not actually bought a product. There's a British company called Clade,
Right. Yeah.
and they do CO2 heat pumps on a big scale and a small scale. The downside with CO2, you probably know more about it than me, is the delta T is huge.
Huge, yeah.
I think it's like 30 or 40. And you need radiators, which unfortunately have to be pretty big to have that.
Yeah.
But that's something where I completely get that, because we have an aircon. We have an air off temp and cooling of like 3 degrees. And you're like, why? Like 10 is fine. Like,
but it's to make everything small. But so I think that what we hopefully will see is bigger delta T's on the unit. Now, I might be wrong, and I've never tested this, and from what I can tell, nor has anyone else, if you run it with a 10 delta, half the speed, what happens to COP? I don't know. I don't think much. But you have a bit of an effect on the radiators. But
if you the benefit straight away, if you say that, again, not going into too geeky mode, but I feel that you would use less refrigerant to get to that.
I don't know. There's not much gas in them anymore. And it doesn't matter. It's all in the garden, so it's all barbecue gas. But
so to get to that $5,000 figure, we can do something with the feet.
Yeah.
Flexi pipes, AAVs are questionable, or look at a cheaper solution or something that does it for less cost.
Cheaper unit. Smaller pipe work, so 22 mil, which fits straight into your house.
Inbuilt filter, slack off the glycol, and maybe just have a water treatment kit with the, and it sounds like you probably sold all this when you were at Freedom.
Yeah, I made loads of money on accessories.
And your design.
Yeah, so design is, okay, so this is, let me kind of give you a potted history of this. Let's talk about the average house in the UK is a 3-bedroom, 1930 semi. There are millions of them. Okay, they're all the same. So what you would do if you're a boiler is you go, not a very big house, 24 kilowatts, because that's what I can buy.
Yeah.
And it's definitely less than 24 kilowatts, job done.
But having a lot of 90s, 30s houses don't have cylinders anymore because they're combi boilers.
They're combis. But we got to find a cylinder, and we'll find a place for them. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But doing your initial heat loss, what size boiler do I need? You turn out, go, not very big, 24. If it's big, 30. Right, that's it. Because the real answer is about 8, and so you're oversizing so much it doesn't matter. And a bit like that in aircon, you kind of go in this room, 5 kilowatt cassette will do it. If it's a bit oversized, so what?
Yeah.
What we're doing is we need to try and get you the smallest heat pump we can, because the cost of them is so high. Mm-hmm. So the first off, I need to do a bit of a heat loss. And that's traditionally done, like we all did back in college, measure all the walls, the windows, the floor, do all the U values and stick it through. Some people have nice bits of software and LiDAR and all that stuff, but you're still basically measuring the house and sticking it in. There is no central database of heat loss.
I see.
So my company did 30,000 heat losses, and they are not recorded anywhere.
Okay.
In Denmark, they put the heat loss on the EPC.
Right, okay.
Right, so you just look it up.
Yeah, for sure.
In our EPC, and the EPC is not perfect, but your house will have one, my house has one, it gives you an estimation of the amount of energy it will use. And it's not bad.
Okay.
So you can use that. But the problem is, because they were obsessed with radiator size in the old days when heat pumps only did 45, 50 degrees, they want you to do a heat loss on this room and that room and that room and that room and check the radiator all the way around.
Okay.
I would now argue that because heat pumps can now run at the same temperature as a boiler, you go, Mrs. Miggins, are you happy with the temperature in the lounge today? And she goes, yeah, okay, happy days. And all the other rooms, yeah, signed, happy. So I'm happy with my radiator sizing. So I don't need to do a radiator sizing if I run at the same temperature. I'm going to tell Mrs. Miggins that's going to cost her more money, but it's a simple solution. I can then do a whole house heat loss, which is much faster. I can actually do it off a right move drawing. And it would be quick. But we do, so I don't do one heat loss on your house. I do 16, one for every room. Costs you money. I prove your radiator size. Costs you money. And that's done because I get 7,500 quid from the government, and I want that money. But I would say that the technology's moved on now. You can still do that, but you don't need that. There is talk at the moment, and I think this is genius. If you know exactly how much gas you used and when, and you know the weather, I could tell you what the maximum amount of energy you put into your building was.
Okay.
And there's your heat loss. And it's not just measured. This is what you did. So there's a little bit of movement in the market of people saying...
Is the cylinder, the buffer, or the thermal store important to the heat loss then?
No, not. It makes no difference.
Okay.
It's just some volume.
Okay.
So you tend to put a 50 in on a big unit.
I see.
There is a calculation, but everyone just puts a 50 in and it's big enough.
Okay.
So choosing the unit, the paperwork costs about £1,500 to do.
Okay.
Right now, that's worthwhile because you get £7,500. If that grant went, of course, we'd all be going, how can I do this for £50? I want to do this fast. So
So the end of October potentially.
no, the bus is going to be here for ages. There's plenty of money left.
Okay.
So that will all become simpler, and there will be better digital models. One of the companies I work with, that we digitise that process, so there is not a bloke with a tape measure anymore. So that it's getting better, but it needs to get really. You need to ring me up and I go, where do you live? Boosh, postcode. I can do it. To give you an example, I don't work in solar PV very much. But there is a new bit of software that you can go on this afternoon, put your postcode in, put a pin on your house, and it prices you a solar system in 20 seconds.
I see.
If I can do that with heat pumps, when your boiler breaks, and I go, Mrs. Miggins, heat pumps or a boiler, then we're on our way. That will bring the price down because, and let's be honest, we all do it. There's not many heat pump engineers, and we all charge quite a decent amount of money.
Yep.
If the plumbers don't charge as much as we do, I know everyone says I'm struggling, the struggling fridge engineer, but
I know if you're a heat pump engineer watching this, you're probably thinking, well, why are you trying to drive the cost down? But the reality is if you're doing it for the money, which I know a lot of people are probably doing it, and they know they can get away with it, make hay while the sun is out, kind of thing. It's fine, but you're better off having a market than you don't. If you were in air conditioning in the early 2000s, that's when the money was.
Yeah.
Whereas now, you have to put a lot of kit in to make the same amount.
Yeah.
And that's the only way you will last.
Yeah, and I just like the technology. I'm not particularly green. I like cars and motorbikes and things. I like the technology. I'm not a massive fan of gas boilers. I think they're a bit rubbish or a bit sort of last year. Yeah. And I'd like to see heat pumps taken up. And I think there's a lot of barriers, and it would be lovely if lots of people put heat pumps in. And that's...
So Graham, do you think that to get to this 5K of replacement, you have to remove the cylinder? Because a cylinder, how much is a cylinder? Because you need all of... It's £1,000. So the cylinder has to go.
The problem is it can't.
Why can't it?
Well, so think of it in your chiller hat on, right? I'd go to your chiller, I turn it on in heating.
If the pipe work is big enough, we can ditch the buffer. Oh, well, and also saying that, any manufacturers, I'll challenge you here, because a lot of the buffers that we put on our chillers, well, we actually put in thermal stalls because you can put them outside and you're actually predicting it being a 4-pipe in the future, so you've got it already there. But I believe that can go, but it doesn't satisfy the minimum flow for the chillers at peak. And then you speak to someone that meters, we had a guy on Phil Draper at 21 Engineer, and he's like, but it's never used at the peak. You don't want a heat pump used at the peak.
Yeah, but it's not. It's not that. It's so if you think about it, middle of summer, my heat pump is off. Right. I want to shower this morning at 7 o'clock to come and see you guys. So I need a cylinder of water. So my heat pump has heated that at 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever.
You're storing the water with the amount of volume, but if we're getting 80 degrees out of a heat pump, you treat it like a combi. Can we not have a heat pump like a combi boiler?
No.
Okay.
Right? So the main reason is this. First off, you know as well as I do, if you flick the switch on any fridge plant, it has a couple of minutes before it starts. Right. So I'm in the shower, I've gone bosh. 3 minutes, it goes, right, now I'll get a compressor on. Nice gentle start up with 6 minutes in. Now we're going to rev. You've got your 9 kilowatt heat pump in your 3-bedroom semi. Combi boiler's 24 kilowatts because that's what you need to run the shower water.
I'm with you.
So you could do it. You could do a combi heat pump, but it would be 20 odd kilowatts, huge power supply, which it only needs for...
What about a smaller cylinder?
So that's what some people are looking at, is the idea of you've got a bit of it gets you away the first few minutes and then we'll try and catch up. It's a really tricky one because nothing makes people angrier than a cold shower in the morning.
Okay.
So you need a cylinder. It is what it is.
Okay.
I think the future of cylinders will be you stick them outside.
I agree. The cylinders that we use on our commercial chiller heat pumps, we stick them next to the heat pump.
Yeah.
Which
you just need a nice little shed and whatever.
So do you know the cost of cylinders?
Yeah, £1,000 for a 300 litre.
To buy 3,000 litre. What's the cost price of one of those?
That is about what it is.
To make one?
Oh, I couldn't possibly comment.
Okay. But is it okay, but we're going to assume there's a good margin there.
Yeah, but the thing...
Because I know there's transport costs and where they're made, and because of the size of them, you could only probably put...
one on each pallet and all that.
And then 100 in a container. The container gets up in cost,
The problem, I mean, you can buy them very cheaply in China, but there's two big things about cylinders. So really cheap cylinders are enamel coated and cheap stainless steel. So if they get a bash, the enamel breaks, it ruins the cylinder.
Okay.
So basically, as a rule, people go, I don't want enamel because it's a bit cheap.
Okay.
We also have the toughest pressurized water regulations on the planet in the UK, G3. So we have all sorts of valves and safety devices and so on the side. They don't use them in other countries. So our cylinders, by definition, are more expensive because of safety. And it doesn't matter if you buy a boiler.
So we're using the word regulation because one day someone got a cut finger and they were poisoned by the water and they thought G3 is the way forward.
Yeah, it was something to do with a baby got scalded by water that poured out of a water and we reacted. I'll give you an example. We have an expansion vessel on every cylinder. In Europe, they don't.
Okay.
They just let it bleed out. And you go, well, expansion vessel and RoboKit, 70 quid?
Again, it's cost.
And so there's no...
If there are people watching this, which as in heat pump engineers or plumbers or heating specialists, are a lot of them going to be saying, you're wrong, this is not right, you're not explaining it, the reason you need expansion is because of this and this, you need expansion in the system.
Well, I think people will all go, of course you use expansion. I mean, I tell a silly story that in the 70s I lived in Germany and they had pressurised cylinders. And my dad came home and he said to the plumber, I'd like a pressurised cylinder because we had the old copper tank.
Yep.
And, you could hardly get wet in the bath. And the plumber said to us that it'll explode. And my dad said, oh, yeah, in Germany, the roofs are blowing off houses every 2 minutes. we do get a little bit... if you ask most heating engineers, they will say to you, we've got all this because we've got the best. And you go, we've got belt and braces. If France is a fairly civilised country, as is Germany. Go, should we have a look at what they're doing? And the answer is no, because they don't know what they're doing. And you go, there's quite a lot of them.
Okay.
They've got a rough idea. So I think we should look at the best practice everywhere and pick from it. And we don't. We have a bit of an arrogance in this country that we are the best. We're not. And we like to go, everything's belt and braces, which is more expensive. So if you want cheaper, but that's the same across the board. If you've got a boiler or a heat pump, same cylinder, same regs. But yeah, the cylinder, that makes the $5,000 hard because, and that's £1,000 the plumber buying the cylinder, not fitting it.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And that's going to, unfortunately, is going to not help things with reducing the cost.
No.
So are there other ways? So the last point we've got to go for, Graham, is, the Labour have just done 100 days, Ed Miliband is like, you cut him and he bleeds electricity. He's definitely super, super green man. Likes to spend millions, If we're going down the electrification route, how can they help? How can they help homeowners? Does the RHI need to come back?
No, so RHI wasn't actually better than BUS. The problem with RHI...
I mean incentivise. And it means upsetting the installers, because you're devil's advocate now, because you've been there, you've done that, you've seen both sides, but when you will see as a visionary approach where they're saying we're going to get 50,000 heat pumps into the UK, but full well it's never going to happen. Not just because of the skill set, just because we know that there's cost, there's this. Well, how can we drive the cost back? And I don't mean by price controls, because that's like the worst thing anyone could ever think of. However, to get to that 5K figure, my suggestions are have a special tariff for heat pump owners that it's a reduced cost, and it's being produced by renewable energy sources, which EDF love to promote.
I think that is what is going to happen, is that there will be, there already is. There's one called Octopus Cozy I have, and it's designed for people who got heat pumps.
Okay.
So it's much cheaper if you got a heat, but you can't have it if you haven't got a heat pump. You have to put all the.
But you need to spend 10 to 12 grand to have that, which is again too much.
Yeah.
Is there a government loan or a loan that the heat pump companies can put in, or or can we? Or MCS needs to go. Make it more free. Scrap MCS and have it a bit of a free for all. We will have horror stories of really poorly installed heat pumps.
Same as every other technology. No, I mean, so I get what MCS has a very valid place, because there's no way the government is just going to turn up with a suitcase of cash and give it to you. So as a blunt way of describing it, MCS are making sure that the grants are distributed honestly. And I was speaking to Ian Rippin. I've only met him once, and he said there's very little evidence of mass fraud. So you go, good, that's good. Yeah, because can you imagine people claiming the money for nothing?
From experience from watching online, I've seen this recently. People are just laughing at the MCS. It's a nightmare to fill in the paperwork.
Yeah.
Getting the money is a pain in the arse.
Yeah.
And because of that, the person that pays for that is the homeowner. Because they're saying, well, if you want to use the MCN grant, that's fine, but it's going to cost you an extra $3,000 because it's a nightmare.
I agree
and that's the downside with regulation sometimes. So it's almost as if, if I had a Donald Trump approach, I would say, well, if you're an MCS accredited product, I'm going to give you 50% tax relief straight away. So that product which was $4,000 is actually going to be $2,500 because the person selling it is going to have a tax relief.
So the way I look at it is the problem is with the grant being so big at 7,500. If let's say the grant was $2,000, you've got two approaches. Don't bother, stick it in for $2,000 less, or bother and get $2,000. Nobody's spending $7,500 doing the paperwork. Right? They're spending a couple. It's rubbish, but you get a huge grant, massively over.
And the homeowner's probably not getting the full benefit of the grant anyway, because it's increased the cost. And that's what usually happens with incentives.
Well,
it drives the cost up.
Cost of install's gone up by about $4,000 or $5,000 since this.
Which is nuts, which is ridiculous.
What I would have done, I said this to Ian Rippin. I said, if I had been introducing the bus, I would have first off gone round and got 100 quotes of various heat pumps from all over the place and build a matrix and say, right, we're going to do a grant. Let's say the grant's $5,000. We know a 16 kilowatt heat pump of any brand, the install price is, let's say, $10,000. Right. If you put it in for $10,000, we'll give you a grant of $5,000. If you put it for 10,001, you get no grant.
Yeah, spot on. The only downside with that, Graham, is it is price controls, and price controls, unfortunately,
they don't work.
They don't work. You've only got to look at the Venezuelan sort of countries that have had price controls, and you find it doesn't work.
Well, there's a better way. Get rid of the grant completely. Get rid of the regulation and see if it stands on its own.
Free market capitalism.
And if it doesn't work, and I am Mr. Heat Pump. I've had 7 in my house. I get given them for nothing. I love them. If the technology doesn't stand up, you've got to ask yourself the question: is it right?
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
And I think it will, because I was back there.
Well, no, with you mentioning some of the lower value products, the interesting thing is if heat pumps in and out, if you've got 5 companies to come and quote you, you might not necessarily always go for the cheapest quote, but I reckon the cheaper products, you're going to turn around and say, there's no difference. The brand's different, the product's slightly different, but this guy is very expensive and this guy's very cheap. It's a heat pump. It's the same thing. And unfortunately, some companies are able to get away with charging more, make hay while the sun is out. I completely get that. But if Labour want to get 30,000 or 50,000 or 100,000 of these 600,000, let's get them in for $5,000 a go.
Well, get the price down. I mean, the biggest thing they could do, and they won't do, there's talk about this, but they won't do this. So we have it's called the spark gap, the difference in cost between gas and electricity.
Yeah.
Britain has the highest in Europe. So our electricity is 4 times the cost of gas.
Okay.
In Holland, it's...
So you need a 1 to 4 COP just for it to make sense. Yeah.
Now, they all say the same thing. Why don't we take the incentives off gas, it's off electricity, stick them on gas, double the cost of gas, bring it down. Brilliant idea. Only one problem. 83% of people have got gas boilers.
Yeah, it'll never work because you're looking at it as more of a corporate strategic thing. Gas and oil companies, they have a lot of power, et cetera, et cetera. And also, as you just said, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people with gas.
The answer is you do. In some way, you subsidise the cost of electricity if you're green. So I think they should get rid of the bus and say, if you have a heat pump, we put you on a tariff which is not 25p.
I think it's an easy, correct,
and that's guaranteed for whatever many years. And then suddenly I can go to the customer and go, yeah, this thing's $4,000 more than the boiler, but I'm saving you £500 a year. Yeah. And you go, okay.
Let's go for a scenario. The bus is removed.
Yeah.
And there is a tariff on EV on electric. For having a heat pump, what there's 2 outcomes in the market, or is it just one outcome? It's a bit of a free for all because you don't want I hate the saying, but it's true sometimes. With aircon, it's floating around the race to the bottom.
Yeah,
it will be a race to the bottom. However, then a heat pump will have a solid cost.
Yeah, I think that you'll get a more. It's like the boiler being $4,000. Everyone knows it's $4,000. If you did a survey out there and said to people how much is a heat pump, they couldn't tell you if it was 1 or 1 million.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. So it would give a price that it would knock a lot of the gouging out.
Okay.
Or at least you might say, well, we'd charge you $8,000, but for this reason. Yeah,
I see.
Let's be honest. Mercedes-Benz is more expensive
For
than
sure.
Ford. Right?
I get that. Warranty, after service,
exactly,
trust, etc., etc.
Right now, it's because I'm in a little club and there's not many of us who can get you a grant, so I can do very well. The problem you have always with these things is, and we had it in solar, they called it the solar coaster because the market went up and down, is you as an installer have got used to the fact that you can charge whatever it is a day. And you've got a nice stuff that comes with that. And a guy's turning up going, sorry, mate, I'm halving your margin. And you go, you've ruined my business. And you go, but you built a business that isn't, it's on quicksand. If I was building again now, one of the reasons I got out was I could see this coming. And I thought, we can't maintain this margin. And I like this margin because it's easy. Sure. And I went, what does this look like if the margin's halved? And I went, I'm for sure. I'm closing
unless your volume is increased.
Yeah, I'm going. I used to be on Waitrose deli counter, and now I'm on the tills at Aldi, and I don't want to be there
for sure.
So I got out, and so we'll look back on these days like the early 2000s in
for
VRF
sure.
and go, God, those boys made a killing.
Correct.
And now now it's competitive.
Okay. Nice. Well, I think we've gotten through most of it, Graham. So just one more thing for the government. So an EV, give them a better rate. What else would you do? Anything else? Any suggestions? Because, we might send this video to Ed Miliband and say, listen, mate, we've got some help for you.
I do think one of the things that they are going to bring in, it's called the Clean Heat Market Mechanism, very, very unpopular in the press.
Sounds very regulated and complicated just by the way you said it.
It's really simple. It's the same model you use in cars, which is if you don't, as a manufacturer, go greener, you get hammered. So basically,
hammered with what, tax?
Yeah, it's really simple. It works like this. For every 96 boilers you sell, you've got to sell 4 heat pumps.
I see. Okay.
If you don't, they fine you.
It sounds like it just won't work, though, because it sounds complicated, and who's monitoring it?
It's already worked.
Has it?
Yeah, so this thing got talked about 2 years ago, never came in.
But it's not going to get 600,000 people buying heat pumps. That's the only thing.
No, well, I disagree. Right, so if you look 2 years ago, I always said when I was running my company, they said, who are you scared of? And I said, not scared of Mitzi and Dyke in their little firms. I'm scared of Worcester Bosch, Phelan, because if those boys pull the big lever and go, we're doing heat pumps, they'll annihilate me.
Yeah.
They never did. They never turned up. Now, Valent are the biggest in the market.
For sure.
Why? They go, Clean Heat Market Makers. They know their fee is.
I see.
Worcester are miles behind, but running fast.
So it's actually a tariff in a way, isn't it, really? Yeah. It's to say that we're not going to reduce your costs. We're actually going to, if you don't push it, we're going to fine you.
And it's a totally voluntary fine. So it brings some really interesting money in. Say you're an installer of boilers and you buy 100 boilers a year off, right? You're costing me the fine.
For sure.
So I need to come to you and go, I need you to take 4 heat pumps off me, mate. And you go, I don't want them.
So what? Listening to what you're saying is that potentially will drive the cost of boilers up. Because the only way of offsetting them fines is by increasing the price of the boilers.
And the fines are 3,000 quid a heat pump.
Really? Damn.
So suddenly, weirdly, Ideal, who I'm a massive fan of, Ideal have got a huge training centre on heat pumps.
Who's set? Is this a government thing?
Yeah.
Smart. Okay,
smart. And what they've actually managed to do is get the boiler lads to pull the lever without bringing it in. It's not in yet. It keeps getting delayed. And there's a boiler tax and all that crap. And no one's pointing out, you go, Valent won't have a fine because they're selling enough heat pumps.
I see.
There is one large manufacturer who's going to pay a lot of fine because they've sold no heat pumps and they're now running to try and catch up. And you suddenly, if you imagine if you go to your merchant, right now he goes out for combi. The guy's going, mate, you really need to start looking at this new technology because we're getting a beating. He's not going to tell you that bit. We all do it. New technology comes out. We look at it, God, I've got to buy this new thing. But if it's all negative about it, you don't bother. But if you're in the merchants, they're going, lads,
you have to push it. You're going to have
You're going to go, oh, I'm a heat pump guy now. Yeah, we did it. You did. I know you're a bit younger than me, quite a bit younger than me. When VRV came in, all the old boys are going, wow, that's never going to take off. Look at it now.
But it goes back to that saying that I love to say, the only person that likes change is a baby. That's it. That's exactly it. And eventually they, that's that. So it's just getting people to adopt change.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Graham, for coming down.
No, pleasure.
Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.